I then asked, like, we're gonna do it. Could you just like authorize that, like, we can charge you for it since we're doing it for you? And they go, can we just file it? And then the partner said yes. And then they filed it.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh. Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Noyes, the founder of Make It Better Media Group and the mother of Emma Noyes, the author of The Sunken City, who's giving us a great start, an unexpected start to our family, the Power of Family Stories webinar. I am delighted to be here with my mom, Virginia Blankenbaker, who raised 5 kids, started with my father, started a successful family grocery business in Indianapolis, then became a state senator, managed to be the chairman or the president of every volunteer organization, and became a successful financial advisor. And along the way, little petite, 5'2", eyes of blue Virginia got more done to help families and the underserved and anybody she could along the way. She was an incredibly effective senator. But most of all, she was a great mom and a beloved great grandmother.
Okay, I promise I'll send you some money right away.
I'm also here with my sister, Betsy, who has actually run an amazing business helping people tell their own stories and grow their success in the world because they've shared what's most personal and most powerful. My nephew, Willie Griswold, is an incredible comedian. He is sort of the go-to host now at the Laugh Factory in Chicago, but he's also on the Bob and Tom Show, which is syndicated across the country and around the world. And he's coming to LA next weekend for the Super Bowl. And then Emma, just trying to give us a great, exciting start, has just published her very first novel, The Sunken City, and we are so proud of her. So we hear all the time, can you please help me tell my story? Can you please help connect me to our community through story? I'm going to let my sister, who's the expert moderator in this, guide our family through the power of family stories.
Great. Well, one thing I'm always looking for is the missing story and the missing voice in our families. And this is one thing I love Emma's book so much, The Sunken City. But I wanted to start with my mom because as I was researching for my next book, Chasing Temples, I was trying to find, we often hear about the male legacy of our family, what happened to our fathers and grandfathers, and the female voice is often missing. And for me, I remember as somebody who is divorced in a family that you don't get divorced in, it wasn't until my 50s that I found out that I had a great grandmother, Mabel, on my mother's side, that actually got divorced. I think in the 1920s, and went on to start a beauty school post-divorce, and then volunteered at the Indiana Women's Prison and taught the women to do hair and nails. So they had a trade when they left. So not only she was divorced, that's usually the story you hear, but my great-grandmother was an activist. And that meant so much to me. So Mom, growing up in a big family on a farm, like who were your female role models? Virginia.
Interesting. I didn't realize my mother, I was always told to stay out of the kitchen because it was too dangerous. I would have been the 4th person in the kitchen. There were 2 older sisters. And then I was one of the little kids. I was the middle of 7 kids. So I didn't, crave to cook like the others did, but yet I took a lot of projects. So some of the 4-H leaders, but then I tried to think a lot along the way. A school teacher named Miss Beeman, she used to take us to the State House, and we could see mostly, I think it was all male. Didn't think anything about it, but just to learn how our government ran in the 4th grade. It was later on at Purdue University that just a pretty amazing thing. The Dean of Women's, I ran Okay. Do you want to know that I have recently been inducted into the Cheerleaders Hall of Fame at Purdue? Willie took me to show and tell when he was about in the 6th grade. For your younger 4th grade.
It was 4th
He
grade.
can tell you the rest of the story. It's
It
kind
was
of
4th
embarrassing.
grade, and I asked you if you could still do a cartwheel for my whole class, and then you said I can do a cartwheel, but I can't do a cartwheel today because I'm not wearing any underwear.
But I just made that up. But at Purdue, I didn't want to be known for cheerleading. Girls couldn't march in the band, and I was a saxophone player, and I really loved to march. That's my whole thing for good health. If you could be in an activity or sports where you could keep your body really great. And so this dean of women at Purdue and the assistant dean of women, and there's 2 other assistants. One of them was Pat Graham, who went to become my best friend. They took me under the wing, and they continued to, after I graduated from Purdue, reconnect with me when it was talked about in Indianapolis that I run for office. After my kids were in school, I completed a master's in education at Butler. And during that time, an ex-nun, no less, encouraged me to run for office. She had left the St. Francis order to go back and be an activist in the community. She lived within the same area, Butler, Tarkington. I was Meridian, Kessler. And she called me and said, you should run for this seat, which is interesting. A Catholic, I'm Protestant, Protestant Irish, no less. And you never thought of Catholics as being your friend. And here's a nun that's now gone out into the community, and she's encouraging me to run. And that was, those are women that were, leaders and encouragers. And then precinct people, both Republicans and Democrats, encouraging me to run for the seat. I mean, it was really weird. Anyway, so they're all along the way. But also, I have to point out, there also are men that also encouraged me along the way. And we forget that message. We talk about who are the women that encourage us, the men who were really encouraging and said, if you run, I'll do everything I can to get you elected. Tom Benford, who was president of one of the banks, but mainly he headed the Speedway race, well-known activist, but in a kind way. So that's it.
Well, and I believe Tom Griswold is one of those men too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And Betsy Blankenbaker, Susan, you. All of you kids came home from college to help with the campaign and walk in the neighborhoods. That was amazing. So all your children are out scattered all over Indianapolis helping you run for office. And that impressed a lot of people. It wasn't the usual campaign of raising a lot of money. There was a limited budget. And as I figured out, if you could get, think about this. If you could get 1,000 people to give $15, then you're getting and you set your budget at $300,000 for that first campaign. Oh my gosh, it worked. It worked. Teachers all over Indiana contributed. I mean, and then my neighbors, Democrats and Republicans, contributed. It was just interesting. So I loved every minute of it. But I looked at it as a service, and then do your best to bring along others.
Well, I love the thought that every step along the way there was someone coming into your life and encouraging you so you could follow this passion. Maybe you didn't have the big picture, which brings me to the next question for Emma. We live in a world where people label us based on our degrees that we get. So if you're going to be a lawyer, you get that degree. If you're going to be a doctor, you get that degree. When you're a writer, it's something that you have to claim yourself. And so with this first book, The Sunken City, which I absolutely love.
Thank you.
When was the moment that you claimed yourself a writer? And even if it was during a time before this book came out, how important was it that the people around you acknowledged you as a writer too?
It's a really good question. I think honestly, when I was like 5 or 6 years old, I called myself a writer. to my mom, to my grandma. Like, I was like, I'm a writer. I'm writing every day. I'm going to be an author one day. So I had all of the energy and confidence when I was younger. And then when I grew up and went through college, got a degree in history and literature, started working in like a corporate job, I thought that that's what I was going to do. So I tried to do the whole corporate thing. I did not think of myself as a writer. I would never have called myself a writer. And then the pandemic happened and I moved back in with my mom in Chicago, and she started encouraging me to put my short stories and things online. And that was the first thing I ever did before I was writing a novel on the side, but it was sort of almost like a secret thing. Like, I wouldn't really talk to anyone about it. It felt like, oh, I'm not really a writer, but I'm just kind of doing this on the side just to see, I never know what it'll turn into. But when I started putting my work online and sharing it with people, to do that, you have to be able to say, even if you can't start out by saying, oh, I'm a writer, you can say, oh, I write things. And that was sort of the first step. And then the more I put out there, the more my confidence grew. And even as I was publishing this book, I self-published it. I didn't go through like the traditional publishing industry. And that was scary. And I would talk to other authors about it and say, oh, well, I know self-publishing isn't, quite as prestigious as traditional publishing. And all the authors were like, don't be crazy. Self-publishing can be wonderful. You're as much a writer as anyone else. So it's a difficult label to claim sometimes, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I am the mother of Willie Griswold, and Willie, from a very young age, was a storyteller and a comedian. He was very funny. In his first grade talent show, he was Comedy King Jr., the comedian. He did go on a little bit too long, but he was very funny. And so one thing is you use at times family stories within your shows. And I think it's important for us to be able to write or speak about families, but do it in a way that where the humor doesn't do any damage, where you're not making fun of the family, but you have the freedom to tell your place of the story in the family. So how are you able to do that as a comedian and still be invited to family dinners?
So that can be tricky. One thing that I had to sort of learn is that I come from like a really nice, lovely family. Like, there's divorce, there's other stuff, but it's not like this terrible, messed up family. It's a regular family. And I feel like almost everyone has that kind of family. Even the most, nuclear family, raised, proper Catholic, only one son, one daughter, they still have those problems. And so when I make those jokes about my family, I am making a joke about my family, but it's relatable to everyone. And so it's incredible to tell a joke about, your folks being divorced or whatever, and then you tell it to your buddy whose parents are together, happily married, 40 years, whatever it is, and they still get it. Because even though they might not have that exact thing going on with their family, there's another issue that sort of mirrors onto them. It sort of maps over to their life. And then the other thing that you hear a lot when you're a comedian is that the only jokes that can't be stolen are jokes that are about you. I can't hear, if I hear another comedian do a joke about growing up in Indiana and then his folks divorcing and his mom moving to Miami, then I know that he stole that joke from me, because that's an inherently unique situation that I had. And so when you start, especially, it's really important to write something that's true to yourself, because that's the material folks can't steal. And that's going to be the stuff that's the funniest and the best and the most interesting, and that folks are going to relate to.
I love that, especially because it also gives us permission to tell those stories that we think are untellable or unspeakable, and maybe even tell them in a place that is healing to ourselves and others, or we find a connection. Which brings me to my sister Susan, who is 7 years older than me, that I always looked up to, and wrote poetry and letters to her, just honoring her all the time growing up. So I have these role models of two older sisters of how to live life and sometimes what not to do. And but one thing about Susan is she was like, she became a paper girl when there were only paper boys. She became, she wanted to pump gas at the local gas station. Like, she was doing all these non-traditional jobs, and it was incredible. And you didn't have these role models. So what was it? Did you have a role model, or what was guiding you during this time to make decisions?
I love that question, Betsy. Thank you. And I love that Mom is sitting here, because it was having two parents, my dad too, saying, you can do anything you want, Susan. We believe in you. Go do whatever you want. And I saw in the Sunday Funnies section of the Indianapolis Star something that said, boys age 13 and up, make good money, be a newspaper delivery boy. And I was 12. And I said, no, girl, that's discriminatory. Girls can do that job, and a 12-year-old can too. And my mom said, write them a letter and tell them that. And I got the job. You're right about the gas pumping. That was the one time that my dad, reined it back in. This would have been early 70s, when it used to be that gas stations, attendants came out and pumped the gas and checked the oil, and nobody did any of those things for themselves. And it was always male attendants. And then women's, liberation came along, and there were a few images in the news of women doing those things. So I, one day after school, marched to the local gas station and said, I'd like to work for you. And they said, okay, you're hired. And they gave me a white shirt with a name thing here. I was going to go and sew it in that night. And I sit down to family dinner, and I say, good news, I got this job. I'm going to pump gas at the local, and
Pete's.
My dad, Pete's, thank you. And my
Did that without permission.
Yeah, well, I didn't ask. I never asked. My dad was mid-bite, and he put his fork down, and he looked up and he said, no daughter of mine is going to be a grease monkey and come home with oil under her face. And the only time he ever said no to me. So then the next day I drove to one of his grocery stores that was the farthest one away and applied for a job. And the manager looked at me and said, does your dad know you're here? I was like, no, and you have to hire me, because he can't say no to me here. But for real, having parents who always believed in me and said, you can do whatever you want, made a huge difference. Thank you, Mom.
Thank you.
Okay, let's you've been asking everybody else questions. It's my turn to ask you a question, okay? Where in the world did you find the courage to write your first book? And please tell everyone about it.
Well, I will. It's interesting because the title of my first book is Autobiography of an Orgasm. You just look at Mom's face. And it was a book of a lifetime of secrets that I'd never shared with anybody, about healing my body after sexual assault, which I'd never shared with anybody. And I remember when the book came out, I told Mom, and it didn't go so well. And you were supportive, but we didn't talk about those things. But where I got the courage to do it, oddly enough, was my mother, because I was growing up and she was out there speaking up for women, speaking up for divorced women, speaking up for the elderly, speaking up for our, childcare for the most, marginalized. So you were always breaking ground. And so I thought you'd be more than you were at the time when the book came out. Oddly enough, that book, it was maybe sometimes you feel like you're waiting for your family's approval, and it wasn't my family's approval that I first started getting. It was so many women and men who started writing to me, hundreds and then thousands, of saying, thank you for saying this is pre-Me Too. So whether she likes it or not, my mother was the inspiration that for me to say, this happened to me and it matters and it doesn't define me. And I am reclaiming my body and my life. And at a time too, where you have to say, I'm a writer, and I'm telling this story. So I appreciate that question. And actually I'd like to pass it back to Emma, because her book, The Sunken City, has this really strong 17-year-old lead character who is so rebellious. She is pretty, wild. And I'm wondering, what inspiration, as a writer, where did you find your inspiration for the strong character? And I wish I would have I loved reading her at 58 years old for 2 more days. But I would have loved when I was 17 and then 27 and 37. So even though it's young adult, it's any age. But where did you get the idea for the strong character?
It's a combination of 2 things. So there's definitely in like publishing right now, especially in the books that are really popular on TikTok and on Instagram, there's definitely a sort of renaissance of female writers with really strong female characters, especially in young adult. And so I knew going into writing this that was something that people want to see and that would be like accepted and is being celebrated right now throughout publishing, which is awesome. One of the core elements of Amari's character is that she feels that there's this sort of like darkness, this like anger and sadness within her that one of the characters labels as her shadow self. And I actually pulled that concept from my own work in therapy. With my childhood therapist, we talked a lot about the idea of like the shadow self, which is the parts of you that you're not proud of, that you don't want to accept, that you don't feel that are really part of you, but are part of you. And that pushing those parts of you away actually ultimately does more damage than just accepting them and embracing them and makes you more powerful as a human being. And that's a big part of her character, and accepting like her magical abilities and the things that scare her about herself is what she has to access in order to grow and become a stronger character.
So, Willie, what is it like to, and we're not dismissing, we have incredible male men, husbands, uncles, fathers in our family, but what is it like to, as a male, to be in a family where there's this strong, female matriarchal energy? How has that impacted you? Unmute.
It's great. I mean, no complaints. I've got it's weird because I didn't even think about it. It was good to kind of grow up in an environment that was, sort of genderless. It wasn't like my sister Lucy was doing girly things. When I was in 6th grade, Lucy joined the middle school football team for a day, and she hurt her ankle, but she was the fastest girl on the team, fastest anyone on the team. But yeah, it was weird growing up because I didn't really I didn't think about it like that, and I feel really lucky that I got to grow up in a family with a lot of strong women. And then now that folks are talking about gender issues more and more, I'm able to see things that I didn't even know were there because I grew up in an environment where those boundaries weren't really respected or even talked about, for that matter. And it was when I was in 3rd grade, I was taking tap dancing lessons. And I didn't think anything of it. And my guy friends would make fun of me, and I was like, "This is cool. I want to learn how to tap dance. It's like drumming with your feet. What?" And now I hope that there's another little boy that wants to take tap dancing lessons, or another little girl that wants to play football.
I love that. One of my favorite things right now is Susan, who started as the paper girl. She's now a publisher, and connecting people with information and news. And my mother, now at age 88, is the paper girl for her building that she lives in.
I forgot I am.
And delivers the paper. And I think this is
important.
We tend to, in our culture at least, I see we don't value elders as much as we do in other cultures that I've been to, where elders are very respected. And so I love our mother is very active now. All of a sudden, she's moved into this new community in Indianapolis and is the paper girl. They put her on the committees right away. And this summer in Indianapolis on June 11th, her life story is being presented by at the Palladium at the Carmel Center of Performing Arts. So how important to you is it right now, Mom, you are a master knitter and you knit, but how important is it for you to still stay engaged? How important it is for you to stay engaged, and you got to move your finger. There you go.
Oh, sorry. Well, this is, I Purdue's winning like crazy right now, and I'm trying to get the sweater finished for Cooper before he before the season's over.
Sure.
So he wants one just like I
That
done for
would be
Willie.
another grandchild. That's how
Okay,
good.
so you understand that. So that's if I lose my, if you lose me, that's what I'm doing is trying to finish this. Anyway, what was the question?
Well, the question, how important is for you to stay engaged and active, and it's not like in your life, it's
you know
passion.
what?
We got to see your face.
I think this I take after my dad, who was a county agriculture agent here in Marion County. And it's like there wasn't anyone that he didn't know, anyone that he didn't help. You know, we lived on a family farm, and he worked downtown in the federal building and different ones, the Purdue Murat Center, where the county agent's office was, 2 different places. And he just liked people. And I just get really pumped up when I'm around other people, seeing what I can do to help. And so that came from my dad. Mother was very quiet. She was a music major at Butler, and I'm going to be a Latin teacher also. So she's more quiet, and she's very well read, but not the extrovert that my dad was. Here, I just love trying to make people who are new, who are coming in, feel like I was a few months ago, feel welcome and feel like it's family. And it is just like you go down the hall, there's about 117 people, I think, here. And you walk down, there's activities, there's exercise rooms, there's a theater, there is lots of lectures. There's great books on Wednesday evening before dinner. And, you choose the different things. There's line dancing today that I blew off because of this program. I wanted to eat lunch early, so I didn't do line dancing. I didn't do line dancing in my life. I was never a dancer, but now I'm dancing. And this is what I think, this not isolation, being where you're around other people and they're encouraging, or I'm encouraging them. And you don't see anyone saying, gosh, get a load of her. What's wrong with her? No, it isn't. What does she need? What does this person need to make them feel like they belong? It's really, so it's really like, I love it. I have a huge, huge family here. And Willie comes in, and they also ask about Betsy, who they had met when she was bringing furniture out of Willie's garage to furnish my place with.
Too much.
So they met Susan, they met Betsy, they met Willie, and they asked about them, which is just amazing.
Mom, I love that you took it back to your dad and the power of an other-centeredness.
Yeah.
Everybody lit up when they saw Grandpa Murphy. He was that community other-minded. Yeah. And I love that you went from, really, Betsy, you're writing about that, to I'm starting a sex book club, and you're going to be the first invited guest.
That is really interesting. I don't tend to fill out these. They'll send us something, and I don't tend to. I put them in my stack, and my stack keeps getting higher. And one day I was clearing down the stack, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. They wanted to know about our loves, and so that's. Do I need to stop?
No, Emma, invite Pat in.
Oh my gosh.
Pat in.
Oh, Pat, yes, because Pat helped buy these socks too. They bought like 12 pairs of socks for me.
Come in.
Oh, he disappeared.
We're getting my older brother in here, maybe. I can't really
there
tell.
He comes. Oh,
the door is locked.
Storyteller.
We can't see the problem.
Well, anyway, that is really interesting. People are, human beings. There isn't anyone. There's a fellow out in the halls is cleaning all the time, and I tell him, he is not. I know you're not doing janitorial. You are security, because he is kind of always around corners. So he's checking things out, and every time I pass him, he just laughs because I said, "Oh, security! I haven't done anything wrong." I tell him that. And elevate him. He just laughs when he sees me, and it's just like become really a good friend.
So
Pat's too shy.
With one more question, which as a writer and storyteller, I'm always looking for the places of connection that aren't obvious, or the stories that aren't being shared and told. And one of the, one of Susan's, first lived story was losing your father, your birth father, and you were 6 months old. And I'm curious how you are able to reclaim his legacy in your life and keep that. How does that legacy support you right now? How have you been able to go back? And so too many times we want to ignore those things and move on, but it's an important part of our story. And when you share it, it allows somebody else to share maybe their unexpressed grief or unexpressed loss.
Thank you. You know what? There are tears just below the surface every time I talk about and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I am really grateful to my mom and to Richard Blankenbaker, my second father who adopted me, and to our whole family for when they got married, he adopted me, and I was always treated exactly the same. But it was known that I'd had a first father, and that you didn't talk about it, but you knew about it, and you just kind of navigated life relatively gracefully. It didn't feel like I was an other with a big negative something on my back. But I did. I didn't really know about that part of me until I was an adult. And then I started to search that out, and I was really grateful to have two godparents that were my parents' best friends. She's talked about Purdue. She married, my dad was a naval ROTC guy at Purdue, and they married the day after they graduated. And their best friends, sorority sister and fraternity brother, were Pat and Lauren Graham. I have kept them as cherished members of my life, and they are like grandparents to my kids. And I know that there's a lot in me. People will look at me and say, "Oh, you look like John," or "You love classical music." He loved classical music. And so I'm aware that he's here, and I feel like I have an extra angel looking over me as I navigate my way through this amazing family and life and work.
I want to ask Mom one more question. Because we have hopes and dreams for our children, and then the children go and live their lives. How are you able to be present with the hopes and dreams that you have for your children and grandchildren, and allow us to maybe not follow the path that you have for us, but still provide us with support and belief? How are you able to navigate that?
Well, I don't know if you can remember moving into this great big house we were in the suburbs, and we moved from the suburbs into what you call the city at a time that the whole desegregation thing was taking place. This was starting 67. Friends who lived in Meridian, Kessler, Butler, Tarkington, which was a very rich, let's say, community and cultural heritage. It was just an incredible place, but people were abandoning or leaving their homes, moving to, different areas. They felt like the educational system was better the farther out they moved. And someone said, take a look at these big old houses. So we did. And the first one we looked at was on Meridian Street in Indianapolis. It turned out it was a historic home. It had a lot of bedrooms. The all 5 kids ran up and claimed a bedroom when we just went to look at it. And it was the same price as the suburban home that we were living in. And it was 4 stories, full basement, 3 stories. The third floor, well, Betsy later made it 2 part of her bedroom, but it was an incredible home. And it's still there, and it always will, because now it's a historic landmark in Indianapolis. But I thought, how do you ever keep track of this? I didn't have help. And I didn't, well, who has help back in the 60s and 70s? But it's just like we had 2 acres. It was on 2 acres of land too. And as long as they were safe and they didn't go out in the street, those are certain rules. But I just allowed them to, be whoever they were going to be. I didn't concentrate on whoever's shy or whoever's what. One of the children, the middle one, I would always get up earlier than anyone so I could have some quiet time. And I would feel him while I'm drinking my coffee down in the kitchen, tapping me on the shoulder and asking what projects we could do today. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. And so he always wanted to do projects. Betsy wanted to go out and, besides reading and writing, which she did a lot of, but she wanted to be active as she became a national swimmer. And I'm going to tell another story. The lady who delivers mail here was a national swimmer. When she saw my name, Blankenbaker, on the mailbox in this retirement home, she said, "Are you Betsy's mom?" And this is really amazing. So I was known as Betsy's mom because Betsy also was a Riviera swimmer, and Betsy's life was just going to swim practice, then school, studying, swim practice, school, study, it seemed like, and escape to her, what I call her godmother's house all the time. And Susan was out getting 3 jobs at once. Yeah, it's
Okay.
I just let them be what they're going to be, and that's just kind of the way I was raised.
And I'd like to take this all the way back to the introduction. While you were raising us and telling us, allowing us to flourish, to be what we were going to be, you were also serving every community organization you could. And then as a state senator, as a Republican in Indiana, state senator, you got more legislation passed that really made a difference. That you authored the first Brady handgun act passed in the country. You lowered you created more opportunity for schools and preschools and families, and you were always not only just doing it for us, you were doing it for the whole
Susan, excuse me though, but so much of that's been undone that it doesn't matter. And the other thing, it doesn't matter who passes up. I would also work really hard on home health care as an example. And if you would hire a licensed person, you wouldn't have to go into you couldn't have to leave your home to get health care. Medicare or Medicaid could help with that. And while the federal rules were in place, what people don't realize, states have to adopt them. The national government established Martin Luther King Day, for example. Indiana didn't recognize it until 1992, and I authored Senate Bill number 1, but I'd authored it with others right along. It never did pass. In 1992, that passed, so that Indiana also was recognized. And then when they celebrated Martin Luther King Day, it was in February, and it also matched up with the national holiday. Federal workers could be off, but not state workers. And people were very confused. So when they forget that the national government is different from the state government. A lot of people need to have a lot better government lessons. And a lot of them who are currently serving in the legislature really need a good government class.
That might be a good note with which to wind this up. I think that Betsy, you've done a great job of illustrating the power of our family stories to heal, to connect, to grow, to flourish. I hope that anyone who's interested will see Emma's book, The Sunken City. We're going to put a link to it in the chat. Please go see Willie Griswold in action, which he does stand up in your community.
Sorry, I left to get my most prized possession.
Oh, yay, Willie!
Oh my gosh. Oh, that was on my desk.
I know,
And now it's on his. Please, if you are interested in developing your own story, learn more about Betsy and her work. She is amazing, and she is helping people around the country now. She leads retreats, around the world. She leads retreats to Bali and Scotland, and there are people publishing their books in foreign languages that she helped them develop, and their careers grew in the process. And as always, please also subscribe to Better, Marin Magazine, Spaces, or follow and participate in the Make It Better Foundation, we appreciate you. We want to help you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John will come.